Hey everyone, welcome back to the Gamechangers podcast, inspiring conversations with the leaders of tomorrow. My name's AJ.
And I'm Harsh. And today we have Alina Jurca with us, captain of the Pandas tennis team, recently off of a national champions win. And you've been captains for 2 years, and this is your third finals in a row?
Yep. Yeah. Actually.
Well, congratulations, and thanks
you.
for coming on. And,
Thanks for having me.
And for those people who don't know Alina, she's been playing nationals for in Canada since she was 9 years old and until 17 years old.
Yeah.
And she's a University of Alberta student in her fourth year studying economics and is a student athlete here. So thanks for coming on. And to start off, definitely want to talk about your championship win and that run. And how does it feel? Like you're the captain of the team and you guys just won like all over. Like it constitutes all over Canada, and you guys won the tournament.
Yeah. Well, it feels amazing. I think it's actually my biggest achievement in my university tennis, mostly because that was my first year as a captain that we won. So I took the win very personally, and it was really amazing to be there and to be able to have that win under our belts.
So this is your third championship trip in a row, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was the feeling different this time? Did you have a chip on your shoulder because you guys lost last year? Or?
Yeah, for sure. Like we increased our training so much over summer, and from the previous years, we just knew that we had to work even harder and be better this year. So, right. Yeah, there was like this fire in the team to get better.
Exactly. So, okay, I have a question. So, you guys just won nationals, and Bianca just won her U.S. Open, and so is there like a connection? Like, because I know you guys have played in the similar tournament. Like, what's going on? Like, are you guys sharing tips or something? Or?
No, we're not sharing tips. But actually, Bianca was actually playing at the same time in the same venue that we were playing at. So we got to watch her win the Rogers Cup since we play on the grounds of Rogers Cup at nationals. Wow. So it was cool. We were in the same room as her, so it was pretty cool.
That's awesome. And you got some calls too, right? Like you were telling me you got some interview calls, like asking about Bianca, like
yeah. So Canada was pretty shocked after the U.S. Open. A lot of the questions that we got were like it had to do with Bianca. So and what kind of an impact she had on Canadian tennis, which was huge.
I heard Drake finally texted her. Did you get a text from Drake yet?
No.
Still waiting on it?
No, not yet. I'm waiting.
All right. So the way we like to start off, Lena, is just by going into a little bit about the background and like your upbringing in a way. Okay. So tell us a little bit about like how you got into tennis.
Yeah. So I started. I started just because I was a child that had a lot of energy. My parents just put me into the sport when I was 5, and I started in Romania.
So you were born in Romania?
I was born in Romania, yes. So I started at the age of 5 and then moved to Canada with my family when I was 9 and then continued playing throughout my junior tennis career and just really loved the sport. So
you started U12, right? And you were playing U12 when you were 9 years old?
Yeah, so when I first came to Canada, the level really wasn't there at that age, so I had to play a category higher, and there was actually no players that were even my age at the time. So, yeah, played U12s at the age of 9.
And that was like nationals. Was that like U12 national or what? Because you played nationals from 9 to 17, right? So, what was that experience like? And was that like you're playing up divisions essentially then?
Yeah. So I started playing. My first nationals was at 9. I got a wild card for Team Alberta, so I got to compete at the time. But yeah, I was definitely one of the youngest playing at that time. So it was a crazy experience. And then after that, it was just like this rush to want to be better and want to continue to play nationally and start even playing internationally at sometimes. Yeah.
Because at such a young age, if you're playing on like a national stage, is there a lot of pressure? Like, did you feel a lot of pressure at that age, or was it like how did you react to that?
Yeah, there's definitely pressure. At first, when you're like a kid, you don't really realize what goes into wanting to be that good, and then like the pressure comes from like how much time you have to spend training, how much it actually means to like your family and even your coaches that you succeed in what you do, and that the hours of training that you put in actually show in the long run.
Right.
And there's a lot of investment that goes on too. I know we were talking about this yesterday, and well, I'll let you do it. Like, walk us through like a regular day that you would have when you're like, 10 or 12, 10, 10 11 or 12. Because I remember like I would just go to school, come home, play some FIFA, like play on my PS4, watch some cartoons, and that's about it. Right?
Yeah.
What was it for you?
So like, during that time, I spent a lot of time like training in both the gym and on the court. So, my regular day would be tennis in the morning, and then that would start early on because I also had to hit that school time at 8 or 8:30. So, like an hour to 2 hours in the morning, and then I'd go to school, come back from school, and then I'd have another 3 to 4 hours of training in the afternoon, and then I'd do homework after that.
That's a lot at such a young age. Like, did you feel kind of looking around at other kids and who were just doing like whatever they wanted? Did you feel like a level of sacrifice at such a young age too? Like,
yeah, you actually do feel it. It's just mostly because of that atmosphere. Like when you're younger, you want to go to birthday parties, you want to have sleepovers, things like that, and like the amount of times that I had to be like, wait, no, I can't make that because I have training at 5 a.m. in the morning, or, oh, I can't make that because I have to be out of town to play this tournament. So a lot of the times you do feel it as a kid, mostly because of the societal pressures in that time.
But you kind of chose it. Like, it's not like, because we were talking about this, and like no one put this on you. You wanted to pursue it to that level and to that extent where you're like just practicing every day just because you love the sport so much. And like did you have any pressure from your parents or any of that sort?
My parents never pressured me really to play the sport, so I did it really truly because I enjoyed playing it. They did pressure me in school, so I had to keep my grades up to play tennis, and that was kind of my motivation, was that I had to continue to be good at school and at the sport, and I had to continue to make my academics a priority as well as my hobby of playing tennis on the side.
what because you're right, like at such a young age, like where did this discipline come from essentially? Like, did you just have this burning passion for tennis and you really wanted to play pro? Is that what drove you, or what drove you at such a young age?
Yeah, I did at one point I did want to play pro. My discipline actually came mostly from my parents. They made sure I was like training in the morning. Like as a kid, you didn't really want to get up to 5, but like my mom and dad were like, "Hey, you gotta go to tennis, gotta finish that, gotta continue to train," and they actually did instill that discipline in me, even though to them it was like, you can quit whenever you want. Mm-hmm. We still want you to be disciplined and like train hard at what you're gonna train at. Like if you want to do it well.
Right. And there's a big like I think parents have a huge role in like athletes, because every athlete, it's like most of the time it's like the kid gets involved in it because you need the parent support, right? At that such a young age, you're naive, and even when you're so young, and to play at that level, you basically, like, you started playing at 5, right? And you have to play from such an early age, and parents have such a huge role, in towards a sports career as well. And like you were saying, and we were talking about this yesterday as well. Like, tell us a little bit more about their investment, what kind of decisions they have to make, and sort of investment, because tennis is a very expensive sport, and it's kind of considered like a classy sport, just because it's such a high class sport and such a high investment on talking about financial wise.
Yeah, your parents are kind of like either your biggest fans or like the people that kind of drive you to it, especially when you're a child. Like, of course, it's so expensive. It's not like soccer. You can't just have like a soccer ball and like that you can kick around a field. You need like a court. You need it's like a technique based sport a lot of the time, so you do kind of need that extra coaching on the side, the group lessons, things like that, and that does become very pricey for parents. And that's where they have to make decisions between, like, do I put my child in tennis, or do we pursue a different sport or a different activity that isn't as expensive? So yeah, your parents play a huge role in junior tennis, and actually also in their attitudes. So you can have a parent that either like makes you succeed or makes you fail in the sport. A lot of parents, and a lot of tennis horror stories that I've heard is that parents really push their child way too much, and like put so much pressure on them, either by really making a big investment and making them want to succeed so much that they hate the sport, or they become like these people that really encourage you and push you to be really good. Like I felt like my parents did that very well. They didn't they disciplined me to be really into it, even though even though it was a lot of pressure.
What was so I want to get, I guess, progressing along a little bit. Like, what was the scope of these tournaments that you're playing at? So like nationals, or like were they travel tournaments, or how did that work?
Yeah, so very rarely were they in Alberta. I had to travel a lot to Eastern Canada to play these tournaments. Nationals was often Eastern Canada, so
Right.
Yeah.
And was like you have to cover all the costs yourself then, or?
Yeah. So it's not like something that you can it's not like a fundraise team event type of thing. You definitely it's all in your parents' from their pockets, basically.
Yeah. And like I guess the audience level at like these tournaments, like the people that come out to watch, because I think you were mentioning earlier, like Bianca and you were like in a similar tournament, like age 12 or 13. So are there a lot of like, I guess, college or like national level like coaches out there watching and scouting too, or how does that work?
Yes, actually, when you start playing under 18, that's when U.S. college coaches come out and scout, and like come and watch nationals. And then as juniors, if you do want to play in the States, you travel and play international tournaments as well. So that's where the scouting kind of happens, and then that's how you get recruited.
Yeah, like when you're talking about traveling, and I know you were sharing your story as well before. It's like you kind of need to have like a hard head, because there's like 64 people that go into a tournament, and only 50% of them kind of advance to the next round, and it's a huge risk. And I remember like you want to share that story about it's happened to you a couple of times where you've gone really far.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It happened actually like several times, even nationals. But like one good example is that I had a trip to Mexico where I was just there to play the tournament and kind of lost first round and had to just get back on that plane and fly home. And that's like such a disappointing thing. Like you play 1 or 2 matches and then you're done. You don't really win anything. You kind of just spent like so much money getting there, accommodation, like different things, right? So yeah, it's a lot of pressure.
So how do you maintain that it's because I call it like a championship mindset, where obviously yes, you have ups and downs and you lose often. Like you're never always going to win, right? And how do you keep your head up and say, I'm going to the next competition? Because obviously when your parents are investing so much money on you, and like there's just even from your own side, like there's such a huge time investment going on as well. 6 hours a day on training, and like there's so much pressure on you, right? And even our parents, like there's pressure on them too, because they're saying, hey, I'm putting so much money on my child to play the sport and get really good at it, and if they're not performing at that level, it brings a lot of pressure, right?
Yeah. How I maintained it. Well, I definitely loved winning. So when I did win, it was like, okay, I'm like really motivated to do better. But what I absolutely hated was losing. So I couldn't stand losing. I'd come back and be like, okay, next time I won't lose, or like gotta change something. And I also had a really good coach at the time that was just very motivated to see me succeed. And yeah, that was important to me, was just getting back at it, training more and better. Like sometimes it's just the quality that you train at. So making sure I get better hits, even traveling to train with better players than what I had in the province was really important to me, and it just kept on making me improve over time.
Was that a big challenge, like finding people of an equal skill level in the province?
Yeah, so like when I did, obviously at the beginning it wasn't a challenge, but as I progressed up, like became first in Alberta, like there was no girls that I could hit against that would actually challenge me. It would just be like the same tournaments, same girls playing, and it would just there wouldn't be a challenge. So I did have to travel a lot to get that higher level training.
Right. And I guess so. Going along, like looking at like your tennis career, like what did you envision? Where did you envision it going? Did you envision yourself playing pro, or did you at some point? Because you mentioned that earlier. Where did it change? What happened?
Yeah, I did actually do. Like, I definitely wanted to go pro. I think it was like the the childhood dream of mine. You know how some people want to be an astronaut. I wanted to be a pro tennis player.
Yeah.
But it changed. The biggest shift was when I got really injured. I had a knee injury and I got out of the sport for like 2 years.
How old were you at this time?
I was 12, I think, or 13.
Right.
But around that age where I got like insanely injured and I wasn't able to even like step onto a tennis court, so I just like took a year and a half, I think, off of completely playing tennis, and that's when I was like, okay, that's not gonna happen. Pro won't happen for me. So that shifted a lot towards more being like, okay, I need a career now, you know?
Right. I want to delve deeper into that. So this big like essentially obstacle in your way, right? Like you have this injury, and you're saying you changed your mindset of where you saw yourself going with tennis. So coming out of that, like, did you still want to compete at a high level, or what? How did you envision yourself with that?
Yeah. So throughout that injury, I definitely was very. It was like something was taken away from me almost. You know, I was like, I need to get back. I need to play. I really loved playing it, so a big aspect was getting back and training again. So during that time, I did a lot of physiotherapy and mostly just training in the gym and stuff. Like I wasn't able to play, but I was able to like make myself stronger in a way. So coming back, I did want to play at a high level, and actually the way it happened was I ended up like I got back and I ended up actually being really successful and being able to play. Like, for example, I played Canada Summer Games, like, the year I got back from my injury, so everyone was like, what happened?
That's
You're
a big
back.
deal. That's a big deal.
Yeah, it was a pretty big deal because it's an event that happens every 4 years, and only 4 people go, so from each province. So I was able to do that event, which was huge at the time, and then that just motivated me to continue being competitive and stuff.
Yeah, so thanks for sharing that. And going off of that, you know, that transition into, you know, after that process and that injury and Canada Summer Games, then you got into university and that student athlete process. So, you know, obviously we have most of our audience base are students watching, and tell us a little bit about that lifestyle, like, because there's those preconceived notions that, you know, student athletes, it's really difficult and this and that. Like, walk us through what your lifestyle is like on the regular.
It's a little bit more challenging, I guess, than just being a student, but it's kind of like having a part-time job, I guess you can describe it as. So, like, many students actually face that, right? The time management aspect of school. You have to be really good at managing your time, making sure everything is kind of organized throughout your day, and being able to train and study at the same time.
What does, like, the commitment look like as a student athlete? Like, how much time do you need to put in? Obviously, you have your classes, but for training for athletics, like, what does that look like?
So actually, like, it definitely depends on each student athlete, but for tennis specifically, we try to train at least 6 hours on court during a week, and then like at a minimum 3 hours in the gym. But a lot of us try to do a little more than that.
Right. And is that, like, say, like, an hour a day, like, you add on, like, an hour workout, or do you have to, like, is there days where you do, like, 2 days in a way too, like, you're working out in the gym and you're training for tennis as well? Or how does it spread
It's definitely, so, yeah, the gym portion is definitely, like, on your own. You have to be accountable for that. We have trainers that keep us accountable as well, but it's not something that's necessarily scheduled. You just have to be able to do it. Making sure you don't skip out on your workouts is huge. And then the on-court portion of it is definitely something that's more structured. Like, we have certain hours that we're training at, things that you have to show up to and be accountable for.
Right.
And, you know, well, since we're on this, like, topic, and so, like, you know, you were talking about this, and you said you chose to stay here because I remember I was getting my SATs and you were giving your SATs, and I saw you. I was like, "Oh, Alina, what are you doing your SATs here?" And you're like, "Yeah, I'm considering maybe having that option of going to the U.S." But you ended up I know you got some really amazing offers from the U.S. as well, but you ended up choosing to stay at going to UofA. So, like, you know, talk about, like, the difference in maybe being a student athlete in the U.S. and maybe in Canada.
Yeah. So I did go through a lot of, you know, talking to coaches in the States and things like that. So I got to know a lot of the programs in the States and what's offered. And ultimately, why I chose to stay here was mostly because I wanted to focus on my academics more than athletics at the time. So, for example, in the States, I think the athlete culture is bigger, so you do get more funding for sports, more things like that. Whereas in Canada, it's more academic focused. So, for example, I talk to a lot of coaches, and they'd be like, "Okay, so you have 5 hours of training a day, and then also get a degree on top of that." So that's kind of why I was not really up for that challenge. Mostly just because I really wanted to focus on my academics during that time. And the really good perk of being in Canada is that I can still do that, just on a little bit of a more, chilled out version of that.
Yeah.
So still able to compete competitively, just less stressful.
But there's also like a bit of a, like, obviously commitment difference for sure, but there's like a reward difference too. And this kind of bugged me yesterday because we're talking about this and you said you guys won the nationals and all you got was like a dinner, and like I feel like that's not fair, especially like, and in the US like the rewards are crazy. Like if like even the coach, like if you're telling me like the coach of the winning team gets like $500,000 or something.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, like
depends.
So
yeah.
like what's like that's a huge gap in like reward, and I feel like that kind of influences motivation too. Like if if I'm a student athlete, I can say, hey, why would I stay here? I want to go to the US, and because it's more rewarding there as well. And yeah, obviously if you want to do more school, then you would stay here. But how does that make you feel, like just that difference in reward?
Sometimes I look back and I always think, oh, what if I had that opportunity to go to the States? Just because you do have that reward. You're right. Like you get a lot more out of being a student athlete in the States than you do in Canada. But if you think about it, there's so much money that goes into sports in the U.S. So there is that difference that, a coach does get paid that much more, or you get that much more of a scholarship and things like that. So, yeah.
What do you think's missing? Like, do you think what's missing here that to kind of bring that reward and motivation to players, especially you being the captain of the women's team? Like, what would you want to have seen your players been rewarded with, like on your team?
I'm not gonna complain because we do get a lot of things still. So we do get we get scholarships here in Alberta, and we are the only school in Canada that actually gets those scholarships. So we're pretty fortunate. But obviously, like more, kind of more recognition. Like I sometimes still go around school and it's like, oh, we have a tennis team. Like I had no idea. And I'm like, yeah, we won nationals. Like we have one. But I think. It's just a bigger sport in the States. Tennis is just bigger in the States. There's more coaching. All the really good coaches go to the States because they just get paid more there, All the really good facilities go to the States just because they can afford to have them, So, and also tennis isn't U Sports yet. We're on the list to be U Sports, so we're really pushing for it. But we still have to come up with our own funding, our own money. So that's kind of a challenge for us.
Right.
So we're talking about benefits, and like I don't want to like bash the UofA. Like there's some good things to talk about too. Like if you're a student athlete, you get free access to you get coaching, you get access to facilities. Like you want to talk about it?
Yeah. We do get free court bookings and a free membership to the Salvo Community Sports Center, which is pretty good. We get free trainers and massage therapists, physiotherapists, sport medicine doctors if we need them. For example, I'm injured, and like the next day I was able to have a physio appointment, and then the day after I was able to see a sports medicine doctor, which is crazy.
Well, you are the captain, so.
No, it's available to all student athletes. So
VIP treatment.
Yeah, I know, right? Special treatment. They also pay me to be there. No, but. Yeah, we get all these perks. We also have the physio that sometimes travels with us, which is great. I know a lot of the team sports always have a physio that travels with them, so that student athlete aspect is great. Just events and opportunities around campus that we can take part of. For example, we get opportunities to volunteer at the Stollery, which is like hard spots to obtain a lot of the time. So like as a student athlete, you can get that opportunity to volunteer and give back to the community, and also just take part in student athlete life.
Right.
You know.
I want to switch gears a little bit. I guess going back to what you were saying about going pro earlier, right? And like playing at this really high level. I'm assuming people that you used to compete with in these tournaments growing up in nationals, like some of them are pursuing that road of pursuing tennis professionally. Like,
Yeah.
can you give some insight on that? Like, what does that look like, or people like that, or do you ever feel like do you ever wish you pursued a route like that?
Looking at it now, I don't really wish I pursued that. It's a lot of pressure, it's a lot of effort, and not very high stakes for you, like going into a pro mindset, I guess. But I do have a lot of friends that I used to compete with and I keep in touch with now, and they are trying to pursue that pro position, I guess. But it's crazy. Like, I talk to them and they're always on the road, they're always traveling. What goes into being pro is so much. You need to have a team behind you constantly. You need to pay out of pocket everything, at first at least anyway, before you start winning and stuff. So it's very tough on the person that's trying to,
like, mentally as well.
Yeah,
I'm guessing,
mentally,
right?
mentally and financially. I think they face a lot of problems. Like, you look at Andreescu and Bianca Andreescu, and
You call her Bianca. You guys are on personal terms.
Bianca.
Like, yeah, of course. Like,
no, I don't think I've ever talked to her. Actually,
it's my old friend from juniors competition. Like, it's
no. You know what? It's cool. It's a fan friend.
Right.
But no, you look at her and you can see like the team she has. She has coach that travels with her. She has physio that travels with her. She probably has like, I don't know, a dietitian that travels with her. I don't know. But like all of that, you pay out of pocket. You pay for your coach to travel. You pay for their accommodation. You pay for different things, right? So a lot of pressure for sure, because again, you can just travel and lose first round and then
Right.
home.
And like even especially starting out too, because like, you know, when you're in that junior phase, and because like a city like Edmonton like just doesn't have that infrastructure to get you that level. Like you said, you just didn't have anyone you could compete with when you were provincials number one. And you like had to play with guys, and like you just said, you basically have to move to like a training center, like but like maybe which is like in Montreal or Toronto. Yeah, and like it's a huge shift for your family. Like it's lots of like your family is like a part of everything, right? And at that level, like your family has to make those changes as well along with you.
Yeah, for sure. I know a really good girl in Alberta. She's I think she's 15 now, but she just got selected to go to the Montreal National Tennis Center. So she just had to move to Montreal. Her family's still here, but you know, like your family has to be very willing to adapt to that change and to support you throughout that and to be able to afford everything that you do. So, yeah.
Even for her, like that's a huge sacrifice. Like at 15, I'm thinking about my first house party. Like, oh, you know what I mean? And like you're having to move to Montreal just to, you know, to pursue your career, and it's so much sacrifice that goes on to it. Like from everyone around you, and even yourself too. Like time, money, everything.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Is I want to ask, like, what's your perspective now? I guess looking back, almost in a sense, because you put in a lot of hours, you put in a lot of time, doing this just as a passion, in search of like this higher goal, right? Like playing at a higher level. Do you have a different perspective on that now? Like, do you wish sometimes, or do you sometimes think you committed too much to this, or what's your perspective on that?
I don't think so. I think everything that I put into the sport, it's given back to me as well. Like, for example, I'm able to coach and I'm able to have that part-time job that's not as stressful as other part-time jobs, I'm sure. Like, I have smaller hours, like, shorter time that I'm actually coaching, and then I get a really good salary too. I'm not complaining about that. But it's also given me, like, you know, this opportunity to play varsity tennis, to get scholarships, and to be able to still enjoy the sport even now. And yeah, I don't regret it at all. I also think playing sport at a really high level gives you so many different skills. Like, for example, time management. Like, you have to be really good at it throughout your life, really.
Right.
Or like your training. And really, like, being a team player, different things. Like they still give you that quality.
Even just discipline, like just staying focused on what you want to do in your goal, right?
Yeah, for sure. That's a huge thing. Like being able to push through hardship. You know.
Make those sacrifices.
Yeah.
For sure. And when we're talking about you getting that opportunity to play at that level, and I think your parents have a huge contribution to that. But I think not everyone has that opportunity, and I think that's the biggest issue with tennis right now, where there's so many barriers to entry, where it's such a huge investment, where you're talking about $4,000 or $5,000 a month, right? You're putting into what, like your 9-10-year-old, and it's a huge sacrifice, a huge investment, and not everyone can afford to play just do that. So talk a little bit more about that. Yeah,
it's definitely a closed off sport in a lot of ways. It's a community thing. It's a small community thing, and yeah, I've definitely seen a lot of players that whose families couldn't afford for it, and they just ended up stopping, even though they had so much talent and they could have had a future in it, but there was just no financial ability to do that. Yeah, you see it actually in almost every sport, but tennis, I think, is that elite community. It's very
not
sad
really.
to see.
I'd say sports like soccer and basketball. These are so popular that now if you're good, you'll get recognized and you'll get the opportunity. Like no one can stop you, right? Wherever you are in the world, if you're really good, you'll get the opportunity.
Yeah.
But I think when it's a sport like tennis where it's so expensive and you're talking about traveling in those tournaments and stuff, I think it's just kind of closed off. And it's changed. Has it changed somewhat since when you were younger and now?
Yeah, it has changed a little bit. There's definitely, you can see different programs that offer younger kids free or very cheap, camps or lessons that are group lessons and stuff like that, just to get them interested in the sport. But the problem is still there.
Right.
You're still seeing people who can't afford the sport. You're still seeing even people like you, Harsh, who came and you're like, oh, I want to be good at tennis. What do I do? How do I make it cheap? It's hard to.
Yeah, Alina's my personal coach, by the way. She hits with me. I'm so lucky. Panda's captain, my personal coach.
Still get beat by me though.
Yeah, me and AJ, we got a little competition going too.
Alina, a question I have for you, just before we get into our last little segment. Does your motivation now, what drives you as a student athlete? Because when you were younger, say you had this passion of you wanted to get a college scholarship or you wanted to play pro. What drives you now that you kind of see you're almost, I would say reaching almost the peak of your tennis career in a way? What keeps you going now?
I still very much enjoy it. I also find a lot of I find a lot of enjoyment in still being able to compete, even though I'm not going pro, even though I'm not in the States. Having this ability to play varsity tennis is still really great.
Yeah.
And what motivates me is it several things. I guess one main thing is definitely exercise. I'm still getting that exercise that I really need. And then the second thing is I'm able to have this team of girls that are my friends, and also these people that push me to be better, which is great. So I get that team environment with varsity tennis, and really just being able to compete and play.
Right.
I really love it.
And that's touching on that, because you're team captain, right?
Mm-hmm.
What have you learned a lot about leadership? Have you made some mistakes along the way in trying to be this ideal leader for the team? Can you speak to that? What's team captain been for you?
Yeah. Well, it's been great. I did learn a lot about leadership. It's definitely hard. It was hard at the beginning just because I'm trying to lead this team of girls that all have different perspectives and different personalities, and we're trying to be a team. And also, tennis is an individual sport. So coming from juniors where you're an individual person playing your own sport to now playing as a team is tough. But I learned a lot of leadership skills and really just making sure that it's connected. The team is a family, the team is really in sync, and they're trying to achieve a common goal.
Right. And the other question I had, because you said this is your second year being captain, right?
Yeah.
So I'm assuming in your third year when you were captain, there were girls that were older than you were that had been playing longer.
Mm-hmm.
What was that dynamic like? Was that kind of tough if somebody's more experienced than you per se to like be the leader?
There were some challenges, but I think at the end of the day, I learned so much from them as well. So like being a leader, I learned that I can, step down at times and just let the person that knows what they're talking about shine. So I did take a lot of input from them, and it was still really great to have the older players, the more experienced players on the team. And yeah, they contributed so much to my leadership as well.
Right.
Sure. Thanks for sharing that. And I mean, going back to what we were talking about, barriers and now, because now we want to talk about what are the plans for you. And I know you're doing some work as well and getting involved to maybe create some awareness about tennis and make it more accessible. Mm-hmm. And do you want to touch a little bit about, just talk a little bit more about on that event that's happening?
Yeah, so we're having a fundraiser for our tennis team. We're really lucky this year because we're getting Daniel Nestor to come out. So for anyone that doesn't know who he is, he was like number 1 in the world for doubles, and he's a Canadian. So it's really great.
Is he from Edmonton?
I don't think he's from Edmonton. But yeah, he is.
Because if you get in touch, then let him know. We'll get him on the podcast. When he's here, we'll get him on the podcast.
And I guess you were mentioning like you want to keep. I'm assuming like giving back and coaching younger generations. Is that still part of your plan in the future? Is that something you want to keep doing?
Yeah. I know that I still want to somehow give back to, first of all, the tennis team, like the university team, and I know I continuously want to give back to the tennis community however way I can, and hopefully make it more accessible. Like I definitely want to push for more accessibility in adults because that's still limited to a really great extent.
For sure. And as we move towards a close, I really want to ask, do you have any message to maybe anyone who wants to pursue the sport, or anyone maybe who kind of wanted to pursue it at the level of as a pro, but kind of got ruled out maybe due to injury or just personal reasons, maybe couldn't afford it? Do you have a message to anyone of that sort?
Yeah, I always go by the notion that tennis is a life sport. So I've seen, even coaching, I've seen kids that are as young as 3 play tennis, and then I've seen people as old as 98 play tennis right beside me on a tennis court. So I know that it's a sport that's not, harsh or too harsh on the body. You can continue playing it. It can always be fun. It can always be a great source of, exercise. And I think as long as you keep it competitive, you'll always have fun with it.
Right. And I guess is that your change in perspective now? You kind of see this as something you want to keep doing just because you like doing it rather than chasing this higher goal.
Yeah, I really don't have a higher goal for tennis right now. I just want to have fun with it and continue making it my life sport. I don't think I'll ever stop playing,
And there's different ways you can invest in the sport too. Just because you don't go pro doesn't mean you can't do other stuff. You can still coach, you can still get involved in the community, and there's so much going on of that in Edmonton now with so many ESSC and different clubs just starting up, and it's nice. There's more awareness about sports, and they're making them more accessible now, especially with juniors. You said there's lots more opportunities coming up as well.
Yeah, there definitely is, and there's a lot more interest because it used to be very closed off, it still is really closed off. But now that you have the success, Bianca is a huge success, and I even as a coach, I get parents coming up to me and being oh, my kid watched Bianca on TV, now they want to play tennis. Or oh, we heard about Bianca, now I want to put my child into tennis. The moment you hear that success, people are attracted to it, people want to take a part in it, and it's great to see.
How significant has that impact been, just from Bianca's win? Because it got a lot of publicity, and people started to really know, hey,
tennis?
People start doing hey, tennis, there's something besides ice hockey, that Canadians are good at, so.
Yeah. It's pretty significant in my opinion. You see a country kind of come together for one sport is kind of huge. You saw it in the Raptors a few months prior. I never watched basketball. I started watching basketball personally. So I know a lot of like people take more interest in it, and I know that Tennis Canada as like an organization is becoming more successful and being able to offer more programs and being able to do more for the tennis community, which is really amazing to see.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last question we always like to end off with is, so we like to ask people what makes a game changer in their industry. So for you, like being a student athlete, what do you think makes a game changer? Somebody that's changing the game.
In one word.
Yes.
Oh.
Like one
You're
quality.
killing me here.
If you need a couple, we'll give you leeway. But what comes to your mind? Like what's the defining trait of like a game changer? Somebody who's a student athlete.
I would say probably passion is the word that I would use. I think passion drives everything. So you can change anything with passion.
Right. All right. On that note,
like, thanks so much, and like, I know you said you didn't get appreciated much when you were going around. People were asking, is there a tennis team? I hope after this goes out, Bianca got so many interviews. We gave you one, and hopefully people can like kind of recognize.
You're making me famous. Stop it.
Yeah, and no, thank you so much for being on, and it was nice getting to reconnect after so many years. For people who don't know, me, AJ, and Alina actually went to the same high school. So yeah, it's really like I don't know how like we're kind of lucky we got a hold of you in that way because I knew it from before and that's how I got in touch with you. But I'm sure you're a difficult person to get to. The captain of the Pandas captain champion. So no, thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me
and sharing your story. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.